Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christina Liano, and I serve as the Associate Director for the Global Catholic Climate Movement. And I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar, the report back from the Vatican Laudato Si conference. Now, before we jump into the content, of course, we want to begin with prayer, and we thought it would be good to begin with the prayer from Laudato Si. Now, this might be familiar to many of you, so I invite you as you open yourself to this prayer just to notice if there's a word or phrase that particularly resonates with you. And then after the prayer, you're welcome to just put that in the chat box. So let's just take a moment to remember that we're in the presence of a loving Creator, perhaps connecting with the breath of life within us. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. O God of the poor, to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain at the expense of the poor and the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, peace, love, and peace. Amen. Thank you. And again, feel free to put in the chat any word or phrase that resonated with you from the prayer. So just a couple of weeks ago, on July 5th and 6th, hundreds of youth, grassroots activists, scientists, Indigenous, church leaders, and others gathered at the International Conference, Saving Our Common Home and the Future of Life on Earth. It was organized by the Vatican Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development for the purpose of the celebration of the 3rd anniversary of Laudato Si. The purpose, too, was to communicate a sense of deep urgency and profound concern for the precarious state of our common planetary home. As the Dicastery wrote in their conference proposal, the hope was to inspire a mass movement for the care of our imperiled common planetary home and engage persons and groups who can develop the Laudato Si message and bear fruit in significant historical events. As a participant of the conference, I'm confident that I can say that all of us left with a sense of urgency and inspiration to act now for our common home and family. And we hope that you too, by the end of this webinar, will feel the same. We are blessed today to be joined by members of the Vatican Dicastery who conceived and coordinated this project, along with several of the organizations that collaborated in this initiative. For our agenda, we'll begin first from hearing from Father Joshtrom Kureethadam from the Dicastery. He will give us an overview of the conference. And then we'll hear the action plans that emerged from the gathering along the lines of COP24 and the upcoming Global Climate Action Summit on finance, youth, and the upcoming Synod on the Amazon and Season of Creation. And then we'll have time to hear questions from you, which we'll invite you to put in the chat box. And so that we hope this is truly engaging and inspiring. So with that, I will turn it over to Father Joshtrom Kureethadam, who is the coordinator of the Sector on Ecology and Creation at the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development. He also serves as a professor of philosophy at the Salesian Pontifical University in Rome. Father Josh.
So good afternoon to everyone. It's 3 in the afternoon here in Rome. I know for some of you it's morning and for some of you it's evening. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I've been asked to present the international conference we had for the 3rd anniversary of Laudato Si, entitled Saving Our Common Home and the Future of Life on Earth. I would like to present to you in a very brief manner 4 things: the spirit of the conference, the strategy we adopted, the methodology, and finally the objectives. So let me begin with the spirit of the conference. The spirit of the conference could be synthesized in the invitation to rebuild a home which is falling into ruin. And that takes us to the St. Francis of Assisi. We can go back, say, 8 centuries and listen once again to the words that St. Francis, that time Francesco Bernardino, the young man who walked one afternoon into the dilapidated chapel of San Damiano and heard the crucifix speaking to him. And he heard these words: "Francis, go and repair my house, which, as you see, is falling into ruin." Next slide, please. And this is Francis listening to the crucified Lord. So he took it very seriously. He thought the house that the Lord went to was the chapel, which was in very bad shape. So he began to work, got some of his companions to help him, and they began to reconstruct, repair the San Damiano chapel. But as Saint Bonaventure would narrate, next slide, please, Christina. Thank you. As Saint Bonaventure would narrate in the biography of the saint, the house that the Lord wanted him to rebuild was not just the little small chapel, was the entire universal church. And we know that thanks to the Franciscan movement of simplicity, love, and solidarity, the entire church was renewed. And that's what the historians will also conquer today. The Franciscan movement helped to rebuild, to renew the entire house of God, the church. Now let's go forward to 2013, 8 centuries later. Another Francis comes onto the scene. No one expected him. And next slide. And there were lots of people there gathered that day at the St. Peter's Choir. Some of my students were there, I can remember that. And what we think, what we believe is that this Francis Bergoglio was brought onto the world's scene to rebuild a house, but this time not just the church, but the entire common home. And allow me to read the phrase in Italian, which is so sweet. Francesco va e ripara la nostra casa. See the difference. This time it's not my house, my home, it's our home. And it's beautiful. It is not just the crucified Lord, but also the indigenous chief and the polar bear and the birds and everyone telling Pope Francis, go and rebuild our home. And this is the spirit of Laudato Si. Pope Francis inviting all people of goodwill to come together to rebuild our common home. And that was the spirit of our conference. Together, rebuilding our common home. The next point is about the strategy of the conference. So how to rebuild our common home together. The strategy that we chose was one of dialogue and partnership. And as you know, the conference was realized thanks to the De Castri. We would like to say it also in public once again, thanks to the collaboration from the Global Catholic Climate Movement, the Caritas and CIDSE and CAFOL, and many others. And the aim was to create a vast movement of people from below, the strategy of dialogue and partnership. Let me just read just one citation from the Laudato Si. Pope Francis telling us, I urgently appeal then for a new dialogue, see this beautiful word, dialogue, about how we are shaping the future of our planet. We need a conversation which includes everyone. all of us can cooperate as instruments of God for the care of creation. We can all be instruments of God, in the hands of God for the care of creation, each according to his or her own culture, experience, involvements, and talents. End of quotation. And just conclude this section of working in partnership. I'm always inspired by Gandhi. Father Augusto and others call me the Gandhi of the dicastery, and I think the Pope Francis is the Gandhi of today, who can inspire this vast movement, and we can all rally behind him. And let's go to the third point of the methodology we adopted, the same methodology of the encyclical, the same methodology by now followed in the Church after the Second Vatican Council of seeing, judging, and acting. So the conference was organized around this methodology, both the plenary sessions as well as the parallel sessions. Here, for example, we have the plenary sessions. The first plenary session was, where are we? Listening to the cry of the earth and of the poor, then judging, discerning the crisis. Where do we want to go? Discerning the crisis of our common home, and of course, the most important thing, how do we get there? So acting together to save our common home. And that takes me to the last point, the objectives of the conference. And right from the beginning, all of us at the dicastery and also our partners, we are very clear. We do not want an academic conference. We want a conference that will inspire people, that can motivate people to come up with very concrete and participatory lines of action, and for which we also made sure that the best practices were presented, and also we stressed the importance of leading by example. And we had very, very clear objectives. We had 4 objectives right from the beginning of the planning of the conference. And there's the next slide about these 4 objectives. First one, raise ambition for the 1.5 degrees centigrade guardrail. And we are moving towards San Francisco, the meeting in September, especially the COP24 in Katowice. And for us, it is a moral, spiritual imperative. We cannot fail our brothers and sisters, the people that we had, the Pacific warriors at the conference, or the small islands. We think of the coastal people in Bangladesh and elsewhere. And this is an imperative, I repeat that. We need to raise ambition, work towards that. That was the very first objective of the conference. Second objective was to do this. We need a transition, not just for climate change, for the entire area of creation care. As Pope Francis invites us, we need to move towards a circular economy, which means concretely making sure that investment and finance are transferred from an economy that kills, as Pope Francis says, to an economy of sharing, of communion. And the third objective we had was to involve all the more the faith communities, especially through the season of creation from 1st of September to 4th of October, this beautiful opportunity that we had to come together to pray with and for creation, and again to motivate action. And the fourth objective was to create a people's movement, in which we said we put at the center 2 special groups. We want this movement to be led by young people, because they can dream, they are creative, and I think we need to put them on the front. And what I personally believe that for too many years we have relied on political leaders or the so-called big people, and they have not delivered the job. And I think the young people can lead us, but led by young people, but also learning from the wisdom of indigenous communities, those who have been the original inhabitants of our sacred land, of the earth. And they can teach us a lot. They have a tradition going back to thousands and thousands of years. So all that wisdom we should not lose. So we want to sit at the feet of our indigenous elders, our brothers and sisters, and be led by young people, then all of us together. In fact, at the conference, we had economists, we had politicians, we had ministers, we had academics, business people, all these people, but all together forming a people's movement in which the place of honor is accorded to young people and indigenous communities. So these were the four main objectives we had for the conference. And the last prayer is all this is a very huge mission. And what really consoles us, inspires us, that it's not our work. That in all this, as Psalm 104 verse 30 says, we are led by the Spirit. And our constant prayer is, Lord, send forth your Spirit and renew the face of the earth. So this is the reason of our confidence. In spite of, we know that things are very, very, very dark and very difficult, but we can save our common home. We can reach all these objectives because we receive, as Luke 24:44 says, we are clothed with power from above, the power of the Spirit. And the last slide is just to say thank you for Francis for Laudato Si. Thank you very much, Christina.
Thank you so much, Father Josh, for that overview, and really appreciated that it was not meant to be an academic conference, but really one that was of dialogue and of action. So, of course, now we will move to this part of the lines of action that were spoken of. And the first session that we would like to hear a report back from is what was the action plan developed for the upcoming COP24 and the Global Climate Action Summit that will be taking place in San Francisco. So at this point, I invite Chiara Martinelli of CIDSE and Adriana in Oppromolla. And I'm not sure if Martina Liebsch is here, but we have at least Adriana here from Caritas Internationalis. So Chiara and Adriana, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Christina. Can I share the slide?
Yes, go for it.
Just share screen. Here you go. Can you see that?
Yes, great. You want to just share the slide itself?
Yeah, here you go. Okay, so thanks everybody. Nice to be in this webinar, and I'm very happy to follow after Father Josh overview on the main achievement, I will say, of this conference. And just one word to say that, of course, I'm very happy to recall, especially the amazing room that we had together in these 2 days in Rome, because for me personally it was really representative of the church at all levels and from all the regions of the world. So, simply saying that, I think you can all guess how was exciting and inspiring to share and learn from each other's work and to set ourselves some key messages and key goals we want to keep promoting in 2018, looking at the upcoming political opportunities we will have this year. So I would like to summarize Action Plan 1, saying that the key words that came out of our discussions and exchange was really ambition, so raising ambition. And I think that is very important to say, because also we spent time recognizing and celebrating the work that the church at all levels did in the last 3 years to try to answer to the calls coming from Laudato Si. So I think that for me is already summarizing how we are going to try to shape our messages towards COP24. So raising ambition towards the implementation of the Paris Agreement, because this is what we need to call for, but also raising ambition for humanity and human beings in all the regions of the world. So we decided to summarize this ambition and these messages that we wanted to put forward with these 5 points you see on the slide. So as Father Josh also said, was from the beginning on a part of the objectives of this conference to confirm the Catholic Church commitment to call for the 1.5 degree And here we had the chance to be also inspired and challenged by different people from different regions of the world, that they are remembering us that 1.5 is not just a number, is not just a target, but it's really like about staying alive. So there is this slogan that is very much used by a lot of young people, is 1.5 to stay alive. So this, of course, is helping us to set the tone and the ambition on everything we do. And in relation to that, we spoke a lot about the need, yes, to call for policies that could make sure the 1.5 is a reality, but also to everything that we can do at our personal, individual and community level in moving towards a more sustainable way of living in our daily life. Then the second point was about just transition. So making sure really like that nobody is left behind. We know very well that in the political debate, everybody now is speaking about just transition and also trying to appropriate him herself about what this transition exactly means. But we said in the conference that for us the most important thing is that the just transition should imply not leaving anybody out of the decisions, out of the improvements to move towards a more sustainable and fair world. In that context, also was very important all the inputs we got from different participants from the indigenous communities, in particular from Amazonia, with this strong call to engage and include in our messages the protection of forests. So yes, as a heritage and as a treasure of in our planet, but also as a treasures that contains knowledge on how to deal with climate change. It contains knowledge on how to make sure that we conserve biodiversity, that we make sure that we can continue using the land to grow food and so on and so forth. Then the fourth point was is a lot about finance, because, and I'm sure our other panelists will go more in details on that afterwards, but finance is key to raise ambition and is key to make this Paris Agreement happening. So we had a very strong call for the different church actors to be clear on calling for stopping fossil fuel subsidies, but also to keep the church engagement in promoting divestment from fossil fuels. And last but not least, we spoke a lot about the need to engage actors at all levels. So to engage young people, to engage civil society, to engage movements, but also to engage business, in order to make sure that each actor could contribute to make this shift happening. And let me say that in terms of this last point, for sure the California summit is very important and also requires for all of us engaged since years in the fight and in promotion of climate justice. It requires that we really move from commitment to action. So this is the way I like to summarize raising ambition. So that's for me the summary. I don't know if Adriana, do you want to add something?
Hello. Yes, hello everyone. My name is Adriana Oppromolla from Caritas Internationalis. Well, Chiara has already very well summarized the session we had on preparing towards COP24 and the other Global Action Summit and the other international opportunities in the course of the year to raise ambition and enhance climate action. I have nothing substantial to add. Indeed, Chiara really synthesized the main messages. Maybe I just would like to underline how important the commitment of the Church and more generally the Christian community was put forward as a way to really mobilize enough political will to convince others who are not convinced yet to follow. So the incredible role that the Catholic Church, but also the interfaith leaders, the various faith leaders, can do on touching general awareness and political will to move forward. Another important part, which already Chiara talked about, but anyway, this is something I also heard very strongly, is the call to listen. The call to listen, for example, to indigenous peoples, indigenous knowledge, indigenous and native communities, because they have been there forever and they know how to manage land and forests and the ecosystems in a way that is truly sustainable. So we have a lot to learn indeed from these communities. And indeed, Chiara already talked about the now there must be a powerful call for divestment, divesting in fossil fuels, divesting in all those activities that lead to continuing this economic model based on fossil energy. And the importance of dialogue. Indeed, as Chiara said, it is important to engage business leaders because not only they have been part of the problem, yes, indeed, but they can also be part of the solution. This was also said in the course of the conference. So the business companies can actually turn their actions into new commitments and play an important role into the global economic conversion. And last but not least, an important invitation to all of us is to change the communication, to change the way we speak about climate issues or even the political framework. Indeed, we heard there is a lot of skepticism outside of our circle about the idea of caring for a common home. So the way we as the Catholic Church in general can change the perception and motivate new actors to get engaged is to really talk about the issues which are probably more visible and more tangible to most of us, which means food security issues, the responsible use of water resources, for example, water scarcity, and the threats that climate represents for it, and the increasing migration flows, which have been so much now, which are provoked by the effects of climate change. So our contribution also in building up the political will and the mobilization, the global mobilization, is also to transform the language, I would say the political language, into more common language that would resonate to most citizens. And this is from my side on this session particularly, and then I might give some final words at the end, but this is all for the moment.
Wonderful. Thank you both, Chiara and Adriana, for, again, summarizing the main points from the session and the need for strong ambition for these upcoming moments. And of course, for those of you who are listening, if you have questions, please just note them, as you'll have an opportunity to ask them at the end. So at this point, I would like to invite Father Augusto Zampini, who is currently the Director of Development and Faith at the Dicastery for Integral Human Development at the Vatican, to share both action plans from Finance, World Bank, and IMF, as well as from the Youth and Amazonian Synod. So, Father Augusto, welcome.
Thank you. Hello to everyone, and especially those who are listening
from afar. We are here in Rome, but we know that Rome is not the center of the world. So welcome to everybody. Just to give a first comment about the financial meetings or the parallel sessions. We had an incredible number of people attending to. We were not expecting that many, and it was divided in two, in a French session and an English session. But I won't repeat everything I would say, but I would like to point out three things, like three steps that these rich discussions can provide to us today. The first one is there was a clarity that before talking to the World Bank or the IMF, that was the whole point of the meeting, what message can we send to the full IMF World Bank big meeting in October in Bali? Before talking to anybody else, we have to revisit our own lifestyles and our own the way we manage our own money, the way we invest, the way we trade. We have to do it, because otherwise we don't have moral authority, especially if we are part of the church. So there was a strong message from all participants on this regard. So before talking to other people, we need to look where are we putting our money, how are we investing, how are we disinvesting from what damages the earth and society, how are we carbon neutral, how are we paying the price for contaminating the planet, and so on and so forth. So it was a call for a personal and I would say community conversion. But the second step was about private finance or private economic finance, and the third step was about the public sector. Regarding the private one, the suggestion was that individuals or groups that have shareholders in big companies can do a great deal of good by putting some pressure on these big companies, by discussing and by widening the understanding of the shareholder model. So shareholders are not just the ones who hold the shares of a company, but actually the people who are interested are everybody who is affected by the operation of a company. So it's to move from the shareholder mentality to a stakeholder, starting from the ones who hold the shares, including the communities where the companies work, and includes the regions that the company is affecting. So first of all, putting some pressures, particularly on big companies. Secondly, there was also an agreement that the private sector can and it's not against any business plan. On the contrary, the economic experts were insisting that we have to challenge this myth that to invest for the good of people and for the good of the planet is bad business. Actually, paraphrasing Laudato Si or Pope Francis, not investing in people is bad business for society. Or as Nicholas Stern, one of our experts who was present in the meeting said, the risk, because in renewable energies, in new business. Global, and to cope with this socio-ecological crisis that we are having, we need to move fast and to move global. So these tools are like, put it in Christian terms, are talents that the private sector has, and it needs to be put we need to work those talents for the benefit of the common good and the common home. So personal conversion, the power of innovation and investment and pressure of the private sector. And the third one, which was very, very interesting, was about the public sector or about governance. So for this, we had long discussions. I will try to synthesize as follows. The first one is, how do we measure wealth? How do we measure wealth beyond the GDP or the gross domestic product, beyond just a matter of kind of accountancy of what we spend, of what we get? How can we measure growth considering the pollution? Because the ones who pollute has to pay. And for that, we need concrete measurements, and we need global measurements. And for that, we need the public sector, meaning governments and international organizations working on that. There's a lot of things going on. So how can we create some kind of measurements to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal targets? And for those who don't achieve it, how, so incentives to those who want to achieve it, kind of punishment for those who are not achieving that. Then the second thing about the public sector was what kind of growth are we fostering globally? So this is an initiative that is already going on, but there was an emphasis that the church should support this initiative alongside other organizations and provide certain kind of not control is not the word, but just to check how companies and countries are growing, and so not just as indicators, but have a sort of independent reports that are public, that with which we can all help in the promotion of the caring for our common home. Why is this important? There was a key message from all participants. We need transparency. Without transparency, there's no way forward. We need transparency, who is doing what, and how are they doing it, and how we are paying the pollution, how are we reducing pollution, how are we promoting the goal, Sustainable Development Goals or not, etc. That for countries that are affected by natural disasters, that are such as some Caribbean countries, or countries that are, or the Pacific Islands, or countries that have suffered serious droughts, or because there was an economic argument for that the poor countries are not creating this environment, but they are being affected. So the international analyze how to include the ecological debt that Laudato Si is talking about into concrete measurements, and what is the proposal for particularly the IMF and the World Bank about that, or how to reduce interest rates for those countries affected by natural disasters. And lastly, it was all about because we need to include in this equation the problem of work and workers and jobs, as Laudato Si points out. So we discussed personal conversion, the power of private sector, the need for public interventions, and then how can we all, individuals, public sector, private sector, and public one, how can we all help for a just transition to a different economic model? This was basically we discussed, and I'm happy to answer questions. Of course, for the just transition, we discussed about tax. How can we rediscover this a tax that can provide good incentives to do good, and and can provide some sorts of tax punishments for those who insist in investing on things that are damaging the planet and damaging the earth. So basically, ombudsman, debt, and tax. This is all what we discussed. Among that was the need for you to invest in forests or in oceans, and the role the church plays on all that, because we have a lot of investments that we need to start doing that. So this is about finance and economics. Cristina, shall I move to indigenous people and young people?
Yes, that would be great. Thanks, Father Augusto.
Okay, that's easier. Well, it's not easier because of the topic, but at least it's easier because it's less complicated to explain. There are some lines of actions. I would start with indigenous people, that they emphasize some verbs for the lines of action. They said, as Adriana and Chiara were, Father Jost, they were calling about dialogue, because Laudato Si is a dialogue to redefine development. But the indigenous people said, yeah, hold on a minute. In order to dialogue, we need to be recognized. First of all, we cannot dialogue if we are not recognized. And we want to be recognized in our spirituality, in our religiosity, and in the way we live in our own territory. Because that's the basis for the dialogue. That was very, very interesting. The second is the need for accompaniment of people who are dealing with difficult situations in rainforest or the Amazon, in Congo, in Asia. So the need for accompany people to help them continue with the way they manage the earth and they promote circular economy and their own spirituality, but at the same time, the way they can stand firm against a culture of consumerism, of a throwaway culture, or a culture of imposition and domination that they don't want. For that, they need some accompaniment, particularly for the leaders. And the third one, it was a call to embrace the indigenous wisdom of contemplation. Father Josh mentioned something about that. If we don't contemplate the beauty of the earth, how are we going to care for it? How are we going to love it? And this is, again, the wisdom of indigenous people. And they were saying, you people, you need to resume contemplating the beauty of the earth if you want to promote the caring for the common home. Regarding similarly, the lines of action that both indigenous and young people were talking about, they mentioned the need for formation, especially for young leaders. And they would say it's not easy to talk about ecological conversion because ecological spirituality, and this is not mainstream in young people. And they were saying, can we not have, as a church, can we not propose a program that is interdisciplinary program in every single, for example, in a school or university, that is present in every single subject, or even in the church, in the catechism, or even in the canon law. So how can we promote formation that integrates across everything that the church teaches about? So liturgy, catechesis, canon law, ethics, you name it. So it was a very interesting, concrete proposal. The second one is about participation, similar to what the indigenous were saying. So the young people were saying, okay, it's good to dialogue, but we don't want to be told off. If we are going to contribute to help caring for the common home, we want to participate. And it's not that they were not saying we know everything, but they say we are able to participate because this is already our home, we are living in it, and we have to deal a bit more than new in the future. So they were saying we need to participate, and please give us more space for that. Participation. The third one was about integrity. So again, the youth and the indigenous people were very strong about that. Again, something similar to what the financial guys were saying. If we want to promote the change of other people's in the world. What about us? What about the church? What about the Vatican Bank? What about the dioceses, parishes, schools, Catholic universities? So they propose young people and indigenous people can help to promote this change because they have lots of ideas. The third one was about the last one I would say was about the urgency for intergenerational solidarity and justice. Father Josh mentioned the urgency. We don't have 50 years. This is an urgent thing. And so what about how can we accelerate the changes? So we have a dichotomy. We need urgent change, but we need to do it in dialogue, and it takes time. So how can we find tools to accelerate the way we promote justice and the way we promote solidarity? That's very interesting because I will link it, this is the last thing I would say, I will link it with the financial conversation. The financial conversation, I know that lots of people are a bit adamant to talk about finance when we talk about common good, but the financial guys can help us, or financial instruments and institutions can help us to accelerate the change that is needed. Because again, it's global, it's thanks to the mobility of capital, we can increase also the mobility of knowledge, we can speed up the mobility of other things that need to be mobilized, like people, like wisdom, like a new way of economy and participation. So in a nutshell, this is what we discussed. We were extremely pleased with the outcomes. There are concrete written outcomes that we need to analyze in depth in the dicastery, but quite soon we will propose a document that everybody could read, and it's beyond words, but maybe hopefully with some also proposals for our own conversion, because we need also to preach by example, as everybody in the 3 sessions, economics, young people, indigenous, were asking. You need to preach by example. We are a bit embarrassed, but we will do our best.
Great. Thank you so much, Father Augusto. And I think you can see from the comments that your sharing stimulated a lot of questions as well as excitement. So we'll look forward to dialogue after. And just to note, I'm conscious of time, and we still have Tomás who's going to share about a season of creation. So I propose we extend the webinar 10 minutes for those of you who are able to stay on, just to allow for more questions. So for those of you who might be bursting with questions, we want to create space for that. So if you can stay on, that would be great. If not, of course, you can jump off and this will be recorded. So with that, I invite Tomás Insua, who serves as the Executive Director for the Global Catholic Climate Movement, to share the outcomes of the session on Season of Creation.
Great. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Great to have the opportunity to share what came out in this Season of Creation parallel sessions. So it was very lively conversations we had, discussing how we as, not only the church, the Catholic community, but also with other Christian churches and also other faiths, what could we do? What is our contribution here to caring for our common home, to tackling the ecological crisis? So basically, so as a reminder, the Season of Creation is this special time that runs from September 1st to October 4th. And so it's coming up very soon, in over a month. So we had a lot of conversation about how do we celebrate the season in a really big way? How do we use this special moment to get the message out about Laudato Si and care for creation? And one of the things we spoke is, I think we all agreed on the huge symbolic importance of the season, the potential it has to catalyze action in the church and elsewhere. We had a lot of Catholic participants, so I will speak a bit more maybe about what the Catholic community can do, and I'm assuming that most of the participants in today's webinar are probably from our GCCM or CIDSE and CI networks. so probably coming from that background. So in the first place, we said one of the goals, and here I'm trying to be very action-oriented. As Father Joshtrom and Augusto shared, the conference was not just, it was never meant to be an academic conference. It has always meant to be very action-oriented. So next month, or in over a month, we'll have the Season of Creation. First thing we all agreed is, let's make it a very big celebration. Let's make sure that all our local communities are celebrating this special time, ideally in an ecumenical fashion, because that's the spirit of the Season of Creation. It's ecumenical by nature. So there's this website that is featured there in the slide, seasonofcreation.org, that has lots of resources for you to celebrate local events wherever you are, in whatever community you participate, be it a parish, be it a school, be it any other community. So the invitation is to host prayer events or education, information events, or action-oriented initiatives. So there are lots of resources in that website. So we strongly encourage you to check out that website if you haven't already. One of the proposals that was made in the working groups in these parallel sessions of the conference was, we need to raise the profile of the Season of Creation. It's still not well known in the Christian community. So we spoke about ideas of how can we raise the level of awareness. And one of the examples that came out was to have a joint statement by Pope Francis and other Christian leaders, building on the precedent of last year. There was a joint statement between the Pope and the Patriarch, the Ecumenical Patriarch. So that's an idea that was discussed. If we move to the next slide, so there were lots of different initiatives that were discussed. So, and here we're structuring this along the three dimensions. You might have heard us at GCCM, we always like to talk about Laudato Si action happening in 3 dimensions. The first one being the one of spirituality and education. So thinking of the Season of Creation, we encourage, and that's how actually the season was born. It was inspired by the Orthodox Church and its intention on praying for creation. So hopefully it's an opportunity to celebrate a special mass, a special rosary, a special pilgrimage, any kind of prayerful activity, and ideally in an ecumenical fashion, as I mentioned. So hopefully this September you can prepare and organize a local service of that sort. And then also we're hoping to have a couple thousand events. And we have this in the website, we have this global map with all the events. So whenever you have a clear date and plan for your Season of Creation event, please upload it to the website. So it's really beautiful to see how we're all taking action simultaneously across the globe, across borders. And also similarly, the other thing you could organize in that special moment is education, information, and initiatives, especially to dive deeper into the Laudato Si message. We're all aware that there's still a lot to, the church and the Catholic community has a lot of work to do in terms of grasping and going deeper into the message of Laudato Si. So it's a great opportunity, the Season of Creation, to dive deeper and through education, information, and initiatives. Next, I would say there was also conversation, as we heard already from Augusto, to lead by example. We need to be credible by leading by example. So it's not only on calling on governments or calling on corporations to change, we have to change first. So we spoke about, on one side, individual lifestyles that need to change. We need to transform the way we live, to live more simply, in line with the message of Laudato Si. So here, just a heads up that there's a new interfaith initiative called Living the Change that is coming up, and we'll be inviting our global network to dive deeper into this, and most importantly, to make commitments. How can I transform my own lifestyle? How can I transform the way I consume energy, the way I eat, the way I transport? So there are lots of concrete, practical, and really necessary changes that need to happen. And then it's not only our individual lifestyles, but also as a church. So in terms of leading by example, we heard already this mention to the church being carbon neutral. The Paris Agreement basically is calling on the world to be carbon neutral as soon as possible. And that means that we, as a global faith community, we have a responsibility as well to become carbon neutral ourselves. We have so many parishes and so many different kind of facilities that need to be transformed in the way they work to make them sustainable, to make them carbon neutral. So, and we already have the Eco Parish Guide, which we encourage you to check out, but expect more on this front. We have a sustainability working group at GCCM. There's a lot, we'll be investing a lot in trying to help the church take action on this front. So stay tuned for more. And lastly, in terms of advocacy, using the season of creation also as a moment to raise our voice for urgent action for climate justice. There are two initiatives that maybe could stand out as the most practical ones that I would like to mention. Of course, there are many others. The first one we already heard is fossil fuel divestment. As you might know, at GCCM, we have been promoting a lot this big global campaign calling on institutions to divest from fossil fuel corporations. And here also we are encouraged by recent statements by Pope Francis. Just the day after the conference, he had a very strong speech in Bari, criticizing and calling attention to how the fossil fuel industry is behaving and is stuck in a business as usual mindset that is destroying the planet. So the fossil fuel divestment campaign is gaining a lot of steam. There's over 100 Catholic institutions that are already divested, and many others are considering doing it in the near future. We really invite you and urge you to engage your institution, whatever your institution is, to consider divesting from fossil fuels, to take a prophetic stance that raises the urgency about the climate crisis. And there's lots of resources in our website for you to check more, and hopefully you can join the next joint announcement. And the second advocacy initiative I wanted to highlight also that happens during the season of creation is on September 8th, there's a big global climate mobilization called Rise for Climate Action, organized by the larger climate movement that happens ahead of the San Francisco Summit, or the Global Climate Action Summit. There will be this huge mobilization, hopefully many hundreds of thousands of people in the streets across the globe in major cities. So we encourage you, again, these resources are in our website at the Season of Creation. If you go to the website, you'll find more, and hopefully you can take action by going out to the streets and making a strong call for action at all levels. So final reminder, check the website and register your event for the Season of Creation. I should mention what I shared was very short-term focus on what's happening in 1 month, but there was also conversation in the conference about how to make the Season of Creation something bigger, how to use this as an opportunity to rethink our liturgy as well. But that's a longer-term conversation as well, but that also was part of the conference. So thank you, and back to you, Christina.
Super. Thanks so much, Tomás. And again, kind of raising the excitement and momentum about this upcoming month of Season of Creation. We hope it really will be the biggest ever, with the several thousand events, as Tomás mentioned. So great. So thanks again to all of our panelists. And I know there's several questions. I'm going to go ahead and jump in, and we'll see how many we can get through in the next 10 minutes. So early on, Paul Bodenham asked the question, the conference spoke of transition to a circular economy. Good to hear, but it will be an alien concept to many Catholics. Did the conference map out the circular economy and the journey to it in terms with the Catholic Church, how it will engage through Catholic social teachings or new national bishops' conferences? So a question on circular economy. So I don't know if Father Josh or Father Augusto, if you want to respond to that.
Yes, sorry, Christina, we are sharing the headphones. Can you repeat the question, please?
So there's a question about circular economy.
Yeah.
And it's not so familiar to many Catholics. And how did the conference map out how to actually move towards the circular economy?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. We had an academic conference on circular economy earlier this year, and we are working on the concept. The concept is not coming exclusively from the church, but basically it's the notion about this. We know that we need to change the way we produce, we trade, we consume, and we waste, because this linear way is generating what Pope Francis calls the throwaway culture, and we are consuming valuable resources that in many cases they are not replaceable, and we are creating a lot of waste. And like Pope Francis says, we are transforming this planet into a pile of filth. So clearly this model doesn't work. So some people, some economists, and some companies also from every single corner in the world, they're saying, okay, can we transform this, economically speaking, into in producing something that doesn't hurt so much the source of what is being produced, meaning the earth or water. How can we trade in a way that is not leaving behind lots of people? How can we consume in a more, not just personally in a more responsible way, but how can we create a culture of consumption where it's not a culture of waste or consumerism, because consumption is different from consumerism? And finally, how can we transform the whole industry of waste, starting from the activity of the way we waste? For example, here in the Vatican, we use a lot of paper, and the majority is not recyclable. Well, we need to change that, because then we are cutting in unnecessary trees for that. So how can we use more recycled paper? The same with biodegradable plastic bags. So how can we change our habits, but also the structures? And this is the industry of waste, the waste industry. So is there any way of having an economy that is circular and not linear? Because by being circular means everything that comes from the earth, it goes back to the earth. And the indigenous people, they have this kind of circular economic approach. Of course, it's not as sophisticated, economically speaking, as the financial world, but they are very, very sophisticated in terms of their actions and the way they are organizing this. So this is one. But I give you, for those who are not familiar with economics at all, let me give you one example regarding the sacraments, because that's another thing that came out from the sacraments. There are two important sacraments, well, but three, I would say, that can help us to think in the circular economy. The first sacrament, the initial sacrament of the church, is the baptism, and is done with water. So how can we revisit the way we celebrate the baptisms in a way that can help us to approach the way we use and we waste water? Just the FAO was saying the other day that to produce one orange, a lot of water is required. So every time we waste an orange, we are not just wasting the orange, but we are wasting all the water that we used for that. So how can we connect this sacrament in the responsible use and waste of water? The second is the Eucharist. The Eucharist is related to the work of human hands on the earth, the way we produce, the way we work the earth. And that becomes the very body of Christ. So how can that should help us to address the way we treat the earth and we treat the products of the earth. In a way, they are sort of sacred. How can we produce in a way that is not damaging to the earth? For that, there's a lot of work on that. And finally, it's not a sacrament, it's called a sacramental. It's the funerals. So the way we die, everybody will die someday. Now, the way we are celebrating funerals in the Catholic Church, at least, is not sustainable, because we are going down to earth with a very, very thick coffin made of wood and metal, and it's damaging the earth. So can we celebrate it in a way? Can you imagine? Can we celebrate it in a way that when we go back to earth, when we are died, that nurtures the earth instead of polluting it? There are a lot of things going on within this mentality of circular economy by wrapping the bodies with a material that captures the toxins and liberates only what is fruitful to the earth, making coffins that are biodegradable. So there are lots. I'm putting these three examples to make people who are not familiar with economics at all think that this is also about us. This is not just about people working in the World Bank. So, for example, the way we approach funerals has to do with the circular economy. The way we buy water, we use paper has to do, and the way we eat is essential. The way we eat, because can we keep eating in a way that is destroying the planet and affecting the very poor? I don't think so. But for that we need conversion, not just personal conversion, but we need to convert the system of food production so as to be sustainable, because this is not just because the Pope is saying it, this is part of the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is in a way what we call circular economy, to produce, to trade, to use, and to waste in a way that can nurture the earth and the society rather than destroy it.
Great. Thank you so much, Father Augusto. So I'm now going to pose another question. So this is from Dan Misla of the Catholic Climate Covenant. So what advice does the dicastery have to move national Episcopal conferences to get more engaged and to feel the urgency of the issue, include linking it to pro-life movements?
I will say just one word and then pass on to Father George. One thing that we are doing is when we are serving the Catholic local churches. Of course, we cannot impose anything because we have to serve them. But one of the things we are doing this year and the next year is Cardinal Tax, that is the prefect of this dicastery, is traveling and visiting different conferences of bishops in order to talk about Laudato Si, about integral human development and integral ecology, and about also impact investing, which is not just disinvesting from what is wrong, but investing in what has a positive social and environmental impact. So how can we create that mentality? So we are doing that with, we are going to Medellin in the end of August. Lots of Latin American bishops will be there. We're going to Argentina at the end of November. We had been in Ethiopia a couple of weeks ago. So we are moving in that direction, starting with the dialoguing with bishops and trying to serve also the commissions that are dedicated to this. But I know that there's a lot of room for improvement. So I'm sure Father George can say something about it.
Thank you, Augusto. And one thing I can say is that the challenge is so huge. We need to involve the local churches, and we are there to serve the local churches. But in the area of creation care, we realize, being at the dicastery, the challenge is indeed enormous. Because it's not just a question of doing something, it's about changing our mentality. We need, first of all, a theology of creation. That earth is not just matter to be used and bought and sold, that earth is God's creation. And as the early fathers of the church speak about the two books, the book of works, which is God's first revelation, which is creation itself. Then we have the book of words, and we have forgotten the first book, this primordial revelation of God. So how to rethink theology, and which means again education, beginning with catechesis and catechism. How, right from our childhood, Father Augusto spoke about the sacraments, but how right from the early years of faith formation, how to bring creation care into our catechism, into our liturgy, into our prayer, into our spirituality, the way we pray. So as I insist, the challenge is indeed huge. Then we need to bring into our lifestyles, we need to bring into the way our parishes are constructed, organized, our church buildings, we run so many schools, we have universities. So there is so much to do. And unless we get the local churches, I think we can really make progress. Let me conclude on a positive note. This morning, I had a visit from the ecology in charge, from the Church of Ukraine. And he said, 10 years made the season of Lent and Advent. They have done so much. So what we are realizing is, as dicastery, we need to network all these best practices because we do have resources. And let's encourage, lots of things are being done, so we don't need to start from the scratch. So the moment we can interlink these initiatives, we already have a lot of resources. And I know Global Catholic Climate Movement does in this area, and also Caritas and CIDSE. So let's be positive. Lots of things are happening, but let's enrich one another. Let's share these resources among ourselves. And the united we are, the stronger we are. You know, Thomas would like to add something? Christina, back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm again conscious of time and really delighted to see the energy in the chat box. Lots of ideas and more questions that unfortunately we're not going to be able to respond to. But I did want to just make sure if Chiara or Adriana, if there was any last words that you wanted to mention. You've seen the questions and perhaps there's you have some short responses before we close.
Yes, maybe just I can come in on, there were a few questions on addressing consumption, lifestyles, is it enough, is not enough. I think for me, what I like to say is that if we leave to people, it will be too little. If we leave to policy, it will be too late. So this is really like I'm repeating to myself every day, because for me also the conference in Rome showed and confirmed that we need actions at all levels. We cannot only wait the financial systems to change, or we cannot only wait people to change. We all need to move a step forward because the urgency is now and the problem is huge. So I think also in the Catholic Church we have a special role to play in answering to Laudato Si and really like bringing all these efforts together. I think this is the only thing that is giving me hope. And I think that's also the message I got from this conference. Like really, like each of us has a different expertise. Each of us has different roles and power in society to play to make this shift happening. I mean, we are really speaking here about shifting a system. So we cannot pretend it's only coming from one or the other side of the world.
Great, thank you. Adriana, did you want to add anything?
Yes, indeed, I would like to add something because, yes, I have seen the passion on the chat concerning exactly this aspect, our lifestyles and how sustainable our economy it is. I totally share and support what Chiara just said. Indeed, we cannot delegate the responsibility for change to the governments alone. On the contrary, we have to do our own part, but on the other hand, our part alone will not be enough. Just to add a very recent update, since I was in the high-level political forum on sustainable development goals of the United Nations that is finalizing these days, and also as a way to, in support to what Father Augusto just said, indeed, sustainable consumption and production is part of our sustainable development goals. And I was myself quite amazed at listening to so much conversation in this high sphere, high political sphere about circular economy. Just to say that this awareness for a general shift is felt nowadays, is also perceived at high political level. So there will be legitimation in the coming years as a way of achieving sustainable development goals. So this gives us, I think, a leeway to push even further the political action from our governments, because it is, of course, is a strong ethical call, but there is also a clear now political framework internationally that needs to be implemented urgently, because there is also global recognition that we are not on track to achieve the sustainable development goals. So this, I would say, this is a point, a piece of information that actually supports all our action, all our engagement, and just encourages us to do more.
Wonderful. Thank you, Adriana. And then Tomás, any last words?
Here. So yes, no, just quick word, mindful of time. I think the energy that transpired in this amazing chat box we had here in this webinar, there's a lot of energy there, and really.
So Tomás, I think we just missed the last 30 seconds. You were frozen. If you want to repeat it.
You couldn't hear me? Okay. So I was saying that it was nice to notice in the energy, just this chat box of this webinar, a lot of energy and enthusiasm and urgency about doing something, and excitement also about the opportunity we have here and the treasure that Laudato Si is to support us in doing this work. I think that was exactly what we lived in the conference 10 days ago in the Vatican. I think it was exactly that same spirit. A huge awareness of the urgency. I think that was one of the main outcomes, was the incredibly severe state of our common home, and the urgency there is. In the second half of 2018. We had a very busy first half of 2018, but the second half will be even busier, especially with an eye on the COP24 summit in Katowice in Poland, which will be hard, will be difficult. We look at the international political landscape and it's not looking very promising, but still, as Father Josh mentioned, there's a lot of room for hope, and especially us as Christians, we should be uplifting that message of hope more than anyone else. So that said, let's continue working together for a common home, and stay tuned for more.
Great, thank you, Tomás. So we want to thank all of our panelists, and then especially all of you who joined us and animated this exciting conversation around the globe. I can feel the energy, even though I know all of you are scattered there, but wonderful to see we have representation, I think, from every continent. So we want to invite you to continue to look at the resources that are there. We have a lot of videos and summaries of the conference. So there will be more. I know some people asked some questions of whether there's going to be a summary and whatnot. So I think it will be uploaded there eventually. If you have any questions, please send them to us at hello@catholicclimatemovement.global. And I also want to acknowledge there's some questions about who's being involved from the Indigenous communities or youth. And unfortunately, because of travel, they weren't able to join, but we are hosting a similar webinar in Spanish on Friday, and members of REPOM and other youth sectors will be there. So when we send out a recording of this webinar, we'll also send information about the Spanish webinar in case you want to join that, or if you have colleagues that would be interested. So I know we are so close at the end of time. I still want to end in prayer. So Father Josh, would you close us in prayer?
One of the messages I saw in the chat, which encouraged me, which was quoting Mother Teresa of Calcutta, who said, "What we do are simple little actions like drops in the ocean, and without these drops, there is no ocean." So I think yes, Pope Francis says that human life is grounded in three fundamental and intertwined relationships with the Creator, among ourselves, and with creation. So let's close it with a moment of prayer in this holistic, interconnected way. Let's close our eyes and become aware, as Christina reminded us right at the beginning, and as we said several times during the conference, that we are led by the Spirit of God. As St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 6:19, each of our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit. Let's feel the presence of the Spirit within ourselves. And the same Holy Spirit that's hovering over the waters, as Genesis 1:3 says. The same Spirit within us and without us. Let's become aware of the beauty of creation. That's what Augusto said, quoting the indigenous communities, this contemplation of creation, a contemplative look over creation. This book of works that God has created, has placed before us. Maybe we can imagine the most beautiful scenery or the most beautiful natural object that we have ever come across. It could be a magnificent tree, a landscape, the ocean, the beach, a bird, a flower, anything. Just choose one image and stay with it and say Laudato Si. May the Lord be praised for his creation, as the Psalms remind us. And finally, let's think of ourselves, our humanity, this common human family that dwells in our common home. And not just humanity in abstract. Let's think especially of our suffering brothers and sisters, the very flesh of the living Christ. And allow me to quote once again Gandhi. I always tell my students, when you are in ethical dilemma, you're in difficulty, you have to decide. He says, just pause. Then take the decision that comes to your mind, and that will be the right decision. So let's also think of some of the victims of climate change, of pollution, or biodiversity loss, or any other forms of ecological crisis. Let's choose one person, the flesh of the living Christ, and adore this person. Think of this person. And the last moment, let's bring all this together. The Creator, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Laudato Si. May the Lord be praised. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Father Josh, for that beautiful ending prayer. And again, thanks to all of you for joining us for this special moment to share this conference. And we look forward to ongoing dialogue and, more importantly, ongoing action. So stay tuned. We'll again send the recording and resources that were mentioned in the webinar shortly through an email. Thank you all, and God bless.